Hey everyone, I'm Bhavin, the CEO of Magoosh, and I'm here with Cat, who has graciously offered to share her story taking the GRE at home. We know taking the GRE at home is very stressful. People have been doing it for a few months. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Cat saw some of our other videos, thought that they were helpful for her to get comfortable taking the GRE at home, and so then offered to share her experience to help other folks get comfortable. So thanks for joining us, Cat.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
So I just wanted to start to get a little bit of background. Why did you decide to take the GRE, and when did you decide to take it?
So I'm looking to apply to physician assistant school. So I'm applying this cycle. So I just graduated from undergrad this past May, virtually. And so I kind of knew that I was going to be needing to take the GRE soon in order to apply. But I had been kind of bogged down with taking all my classes. In addition to that, I played softball in college. So I was super busy with that. And I was getting my patient care experience hours. So I was working like 30 hours a week roughly. So it was a little bit hard to find time to study. But I was pretty much like, as I was starting my senior year, like, okay, we need to start getting on this. And then obviously all the pandemic stuff. So I started around January with very light studying. And in January, I took a practice exam that I found online just to get kind of a base score to see where I was at. And then after that, I kind of wavered off for a bit and was kind of light studying here and there. Like I'd go through a couple flashcards a week or like a couple new math problems. And then in May, once classes ended, then I took another practice exam and to my surprise, didn't actually go up at all. Kind of flatlined and actually did a little bit worse, but just because of the different test. But so I was like, okay, we need to buckle down. So pretty much I did like 1 month crash course all through May and took the GRE at the end of May.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So you had a lot going on, a lot finishing up school, and then it sounds like you started studying in January. So if you were studying in January at the time, you probably thought you were going to take the GRE at a test center. So I'm curious how that transition from, okay, I'm lightly studying and I might take it at a test center to, oh, wow, I'm going to have to take it at home. Was that stressful? And I'd love to hear sort of how you were thinking about that.
So when I initially started studying, I was anticipating that I'd be at a testing center. So most of the time I would, put myself in like a cubicle at the library or something and try to like be in the quietest place possible because I knew I get to the testing center and, oh, you're going to be in a room that's silent. So I was kind of trying to prepare for that. Usually I wouldn't say I'm a bad test taker, but I'm kind of average test taker. But so I was trying to prep for that. And then I also had an ETS account and was constantly kind of searching for dates. I originally was planning on taking the GRE like end of March, early April. And then as one thing escalated and then all of a sudden now we're at home, now we're all at home and everything with that. And I started realizing, because for a few weeks in there, they were like, oh, we just aren't doing the GRE. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just be here. And then they started saying how they have the at-home version, of which I was like more nervous about, because then I'm like, I was reading all of the requisites that they have on their website, and I was kind of nervous of like, okay, well, my laptop has a camera, but what if my room is not up to par with what they are expecting? And I had read a couple horror stories from the first people that were taking it saying, oh, I had this in the room, and then they said, oh, nope, you're done, and canceled. So I was a little bit nervous about that, and was constantly like, okay, I'd read through it like 6 or 7 times, like, okay, I think I have all of the requirements. A big difference was that you couldn't use paper, that you had to use a whiteboard. And so, I mean, I had a little like calendar one at home that like had all the dates on it. And I was mostly using that for practice, which probably wasn't the best idea, but I was using that for all the practice to get used to kind of writing on a whiteboard because I'm left-handed. So my writing style kind of had to change because otherwise I'd erase what I'd write. But then after a while, I was like, okay, I got used to kind of how much space I had because you can't have a giant one. I have mine right here, actually. So like I got a smaller one at the dollar store. It has the border on it, but they actually, with when I was in my testing thing, they said that was okay. So I imagine if there's like a little design on it, it's okay, but obviously not a complete like calendar or anything. Um, but yeah, like as I was doing the practice, I was like, okay, here's how we transition it to being now I'm in my bedroom taking it, or like we have a home office, so I kind of tried to go in there as much as I could to study because then I figured I'd be taking it in that room. So that was kind of helpful.
Wow. So the shift from going from a test center to taking it at home and then reading through all the requirements sounds intense. And I know a lot of students have gone through the same experience of like, do I need an external webcam or I have to show the whole room? Or what if something breaks at the last minute or they tell me it was canceled? So it sounds like you got through that okay. And it's also really interesting to hear that you're able to have a design on your whiteboard around the
Yeah.
border. So did you end up taking it in that home office room? And were there any sort of issues during the test taking itself where the proctor had to like stop you or for any reason?
So as far as the room, yeah, I ended up taking it in that room. There was a dresser behind me, and then it's my mom obviously is working from home now, so that's where she does all her work stuff. So she took everything out. And on the desk, it has like different compartments on it. And so what I did was I just put a blanket over it because I was nervous that they would flag that as something that couldn't happen. So I just took a regular sheet and put that over. And then the dresser behind me, I did that too, just to like take out any possible like confounds they would find. And then as far as the testing experience went, my proctor, I had multiple different proctors throughout, which was kind of interesting. So I can't see the proctor, but they can have access to my camera and they have my microphone too. Although sometimes I would ask a question and like it would be dead air for 5 or more minutes. So that was kind of weird. I wasn't asking questions about the test itself. It was after that I had questions. Um, but as far as like the initial, they had me they had my photo of myself. I had to show my ID. And then I had to give a scan of the room. So I just picked up my laptop and kind of went around. And so that part wasn't bad at all. The person who was on the other line was like, okay, hold here. And, oh, can you go back to under your desk? So they were pretty straightforward with what they wanted to see. And I had no problems with any of that. And then that whole time I could hear that her microphone was on. So that was kind of nice that I could hear that someone was there. And so after we went through all of that, she was like, okay, you're good to take your test. And then I just clicked start. And then after that, it was all just whatever was on my screen. I was just reading and going on at my own pace. Well, the pace of the GRE, but.
Okay. Yeah. And I can imagine just the notion of like you ask a question and having to wait for 5 minutes being a little intense. I'm curious about that. Did they ever respond to you? And like, could you share sort of, you said it was after the test. So could you share like the kind of question it was? I'm just curious so people have a sense of what to expect.
Right. Yeah. So it was after I finished the last section. And then after that, it says, oh, put in your school information. And I wasn't sure if that was like my undergrad school information or where I wanted to send my scores to, because I know you can send 4 free ones along with like your main GRE test. So I wanted to send it to a few schools, but I wasn't sure if that was the place I should do it yet. So I was like, hi, Proctor, can you hear me? And like, it was nothing. And I didn't want to click out and I didn't want to like move around the room at all because I was like, is it, so I was sitting there and I, was like, hey, can anyone hear me? Hi, I have a question. And it was just dead air. And that probably went on for about 4 or 5 minutes as I was like, okay, well, I'm done with the test, but I need something. So that was kind of weird. And eventually they did end up, oh, hi, how can I help you? And I was like, yeah, I just have this question. They were like, yeah, I think so. And I was like, okay, thanks. So I finished through and I clicked through and luckily it all went well. And then at the very end, I finished submitting what schools I wanted to send it to. And I was like, okay, I'm finished. am I all good? And it was dead air again. So after about 3 minutes of that, I was like, okay, if I need to be here, tell me now or I'm logging off. And so I heard nothing, so I logged off, but I got my score, so we know it went through. But it was just kind of a weird experience of like, okay, I'm going now. So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine how weird that is. And I'm sure it's incredibly helpful for other folks to know that like that could happen or that you might have to wait 5 minutes because if it were me and I asked a question and I didn't hear anything back in a minute, I'd probably just have moved forward. But it's potentially helpful to know that I think the proctor isn't monitoring. They're monitoring your screen, I believe, the whole time, but they're not physically present for you the whole time.
Right. And so I'm not sure if I had a question during the exam, like about, oh, like my computer's freezing or something. I'm not sure how that would have been handled, considering it's all time based. But as far as like how I was taking it, I mean, my Wi-Fi connection was good. And so I had no problem actually clicking through the exam. Like every time I'd start, it would give me the whole time. It wasn't lagging at all. So that was good.
Great. And yeah, definitely recommend like for folks to be in a room with strong Wi-Fi because that's one of those things you don't want to drop off. Or if you can be wired, even better.
Right.
And were you able to have any food or drink in the room with you? I know some folks who have been able to have like a clear glass of water, and I'm curious if you did anything like that.
I didn't ask for a clear glass of water in there. I probably could have, but I just had a water bottle and snacks outside the room. So when it came time for the break, so I got through the sections and then again, like there was no proctor interaction, but it was like, now is your break, 10 minutes. And so I was like, announced to the proctor, hey, I'm gonna go, take a lap. I'll be back. And I put an alarm on my phone when I left the room for 9 minutes. That way I knew kind of how long it took. I left the room, I got a drink, went to the bathroom. Um, it was kind of weird because I was in my house. So unlike at a testing center where you're just in the hallway for a little bit, I mean, there is no like, I could just walk around. I went to my kitchen, like made a quick snack. I was like, and then I was like, oh, timer's up, time to head back to the room. Um, and so, yeah, I had no problem with that. And then when the 10 minutes was up, it was just like, okay, click to begin your next section. And it just like went one into the next. Again, no proctor interaction, but I'm sure somewhere they were they were watching what I was doing, I'm sure. Um, so yeah, I had no problem with that. And then also when I got with the writing section at the very beginning, because they say your ears have to be visible the whole time. And yeah. And I was writing and I dropped my pen on the floor, my like expo marker. And I was like, so I quickly went down and grabbed it. And again, I had no problem with that. So I was kind of nervous about if I left at all, if they would flag it. But they didn't. So I'm thinking it's really more if you're just not visible for, 5 or 10 seconds, they'd be like, hey, where did you go? So if people are nervous about that, that's like something that I was, but it was okay.
No, that's great to know. I mean, I could see that being incredibly stressful. And right, they do want your ears visible to make sure, they're presumably make sure no one's talking to you or giving you any kind of information. And so I'd probably be nervous about that too.
Yeah. Or I was wearing glasses too, because I wear contacts most of the time. But before I started, they asked to see my glasses and put them up to the camera. So that was kind of interesting. But I mean, it made sense. I did it. They were fine.
Well, you survived, and it sounds like the experience overall went well. And so you had talked about how you'd approach studying and how you started in January and then sort of studied light and then took a practice test. Can you share more about sort of what your goals were originally? Like, how were you hoping to do, and how did sort of that studying process evolve? What tools did you use?
So as far as what my goals were, I kind of looked at the schools I was interested in. And as far as like what actual requirements were, they required like most schools require like a 150-ish, both like the verbal and the math section. So that was like my very minimum. I was like, I at least need to get a 150 on each section. My goal was about 155 because I figured that would be a pretty good, like competitive without like going above and beyond, just because I didn't have the time and like the wherewithal to be able to put in the amount of studying that it required. And so, yeah, so I took the one in January and got about a 150, 151. And I was like, okay, like, that's good. Like, let's build off of there. And then when I was saying in May, I took it again and I got a 149 and a 150. And I was like, oh, that wasn't quite what I was hoping. So yeah, throughout May, I kind of put it into overdrive and was every day I was doing tons of vocab review. I actually did download the Magoosh app and used their vocab because they also do some of like the multiple choice questions, which I found really helpful. In addition, just the flashcards. So I was trying to go through all of those, like, and I would go through each one kind of like I would do like one section a day of those, and then I'd at like the end of the week, I would usually like my fifth day of doing them, I would just review the five before moving on to the next ones. And then as far as like the math sections go, I was just taking as many practice exams and as many like math reviews as possible throughout the month of May. So as May went on, like once a week, I would do a practice exam where I would actually sit down for the 4 hours and like take it from start to finish, just to really help get the full effect of like, okay, you're going to have the stamina to go for 4 hours and just take this exam. So I was trying to get myself prepared for that so I could like try to help ease the mental fatigue because I know it was going to happen a little bit no matter what. But mostly was just trying to take as many practice exams as possible. I think I did 7 or 8 practice exams within a month, which is a lot. But I think by doing it so many times, I kind of got used to the format and got myself prepared for, okay, well, we're going to have about this many questions of this and this many questions of that, and really helped ease that fatigue process, which was really helpful. And by the end of the month, I was getting about the score that I was hoping for or closer to. What I was aiming for. And so I ended up getting a 157 and a 156 verbal and math, and then a 5.0 on my writing sections, which was about what I was like testing or my practice tests were having. So that was really good because I always heard that when you take the actual, it's usually a little bit lower than what your practice exams are. But I think by having that constant practice exam being taken, that it helped kind of ease when I got to the real one, because it's like, oh, I've been sitting down for 4 hours every week now. And so that helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, what I heard is that you were scoring around 150 on each section, and then you jumped to 156, 157 through all of that practice, that repetition, taking all those practice tests. So a 13-point increase, which is awesome. And it sounds like you beat your goals of the 155 on each, which is great. And I'm curious, and I know our students will be, is like, what did you use for, so I know you used our flashcard app for vocab, but what did you use for the practice exams? Did you use ETS's material or other material? I'm sure that will be helpful.
Yeah, so I had downloaded the ETS ones because it's for free through their website. And then the weekend before, I was just starting to get a little bit burned out. So I was like, you know what? I ended up not taking any of the ETS ones, but I had just Googled, honestly, mostly like free GRE practice exams and found a couple PDFs. I only did ones that had like the answers with them because I kind of thought it wouldn't be worth it if I couldn't find out what the answer was. But a lot of them, like there's PDFs of like old books that are online, like whether it's like Princeton Review or other ones. So I found those really helpful because again, I could take them online. I would put my timer up, and again, I would sit down in the room and I'd say, all right, like start the timer, go through it. And then after I would finish the whole exam, I would go through it, kind of grade it for myself so I had an idea of the number. And then after that, I would then go through all the ones that I got wrong and kind of review that concept. So like for the verbal, a lot of the times it was like, okay, well, I didn't know any of these words, and I would go through and then look them up. And then like I ended up making a Quizlet with all of like the flashcards of words that I didn't know. So that was kind of tedious, but I think it actually really helped because then honestly, by the time I had like typed it all out and made the flashcards, I was like, oh yeah, this word means this. Like, so that kind of helped. And then for the math sections, there's a lot of resources online for different math I know ETS has one, and so I kind of used that a bit. But if there was a certain concept that I wasn't really great at, I would go to like they have like this manual online, and it's I want to say like over 150 pages of just all these math concepts. So instead of like reading through that after each practice test, I'd be like, oh, okay, I wasn't really good with prime numbers or something, and I'd go to that manual and go to the prime number section and kind of read through it because then it's coming from ETS and it also has exactly what they want you to know about prime numbers or whatever topic it is. So I found that really helpful. And then for the writing sections, I had heard from a few people that Greg Matt was really good for helping with that. So I watched some of his videos and kind of how he broke down the different writing sections and kind of his outline. And then I kind of from there morphed my own kind of outline for how to go about them. So I found that really helpful too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like you are really resourceful in looking at sort of all the materials across different companies and whatnot. I can imagine that taking those practice tests really helped with the stamina. I mean, that's one thing we recommend is when you're studying, like to take a number of practice tests over the course of your studies. And it's, again, awesome that you went through the experience taking it at home and then also beat your goals. Is there anything else that you think like you wish you would have known going in that you want to share with anyone watching?
As far as the at-home GRE, I think as long as like you're comfortable with the area you're in, I made sure I told my family ahead of time. I told them all, I was like, hey, grab the dog, go anywhere except anywhere by that room, and made sure it was a pretty quiet environment. And then honestly, like the day before, I just tried to relax as much as possible because I knew if I was trying to stress myself in like last minute study, that it wasn't going to be beneficial. So my GRE, I took it at 4:30 in the afternoon. So I kind of like woke up that morning and it was really hard for me not to be like, okay, I need to, brush up on a couple last minute things or stuff like that. So like day of, kind of take a breath for like the writing sections, maybe kind of go through an outline one more time of kind of here's how I want it to look kind of thing. But otherwise at that point, what you know, what you don't, and kind of being confident enough that like, hey, I've done the work, I'm ready for this, and just taking that deep breath as you sit down. Because I mean, I was really nervous when I first started talking with the proctor, and then I think because again of taking all those practice exams, like once I got into like the first section, the second section, I was like, okay, you know what, you've done this before, you're just doing it again, and like getting into that groove like that, I think was really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure folks will that advice will resonate with them. So thanks so much for sharing your experience, for sort of walking through all of the details and how you studied, how you set up your room, the requirements and whatnot. And really appreciate that you were willing to tell your story. So yeah, thanks, Kat.
All right, yeah, thank you.
And if anyone wants to learn more about Magoosh or what we have to offer, you can go to our site at gre.magoosh, magoosh.com. We have lots of resources. Like Kat mentioned, we have the flashcards app, we have a vocab builder app, and we also have lots of lesson videos, practice tests, many things to help you prep for your experience taking the GRE.